But it's hard to put into words how devastating it is psychologically, emotionally, in every way to have to say you did something you didn't do, have your government force you to do it, and that you're now a part of this narrative that you were a part of an anarchist mob that tried to overthrow the government. When in fact, I had up until then spent years trying to make our country a better place.
Right.
That's what I was trying to do.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Today, we are joined by Brandon Straka with WalkAway. And Brandon, I'm just so excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
When did you become a Republican?
2017, which would have been about 6 months before I started WalkAway.
And that was after Trump was elected?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So I voted for Hillary in 2016 after voting for Obama twice and always being a lifelong straight ticket Democrat Party voter. And I didn't think Trump would win. And the media that I trusted my whole life promised me that he was not going to win and that Hillary was going to win in a landslide. You know, this was supposed to be, remember, an extension of the 8 scandal-free years of Barack Obama's presidency. So it was a natural evolution that we would elect our first woman president and she would continue Barack Obama's legacy. And I was all in for it. You know, I was always a lifelong liberal. And so when the 2016 election turned out the way that it did, which was, I think, unexpected for everybody, even Trump supporters, I think were probably a little bit surprised that he took the victory in 2016. I was devastated. I was crushed. And I mean, like I called out sick to work the next day and I was on Facebook Live crying. And so I spent about 2 weeks feeling like really in despair. And it was a combination of feeling afraid and angry and confused and all of these things. And so after about 2 weeks, I made a decision that if I was going to get through this next 4 years, I needed to find a way to understand what had happened. It was never my intention to be okay with it or to think that I would support Trump or like his supporters. I just wanted to understand, how did the media that I trusted get it so wrong? Because I felt also betrayed and deceived. And so I kind of went on this journey of research, but the really pivotal moment was in January of 2017, right around the time he was about to take office. And I had been like lashing out on Facebook for months since he won. And I posted in January of 2017 that I would never be able to understand how or why anybody would vote for a man who was capable of mocking a reporter's disability in front of a cheering crowd. Like, you know, what is wrong with all of you people? And I grew up in Nebraska, so a small town. So I knew that most of my family, people I went to high school with, probably all voted for Trump. But I had already pre-forgiven him because he was going to lose. So,
right.
You know, so I was like, okay, let him vote for Trump because she's going to win in a landslide. But when I posted that, somebody, actually my childhood babysitter, reached out to me privately. And she said, I'm not trying to start a fight with you. I'm just asking, have you seen this? And she sent me a link to a video entitled Debunking that Trump Mocked the Disabled Reporter. And when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, God, more Fox News brainwashing and right-wing propaganda. But I watched the video and it showed very, very clearly. So if anyone doesn't know, it's basically a compilation of footage that shows Donald Trump doing that same voice and gesture when he's kind of like, throughout the years. But it's obvious that this is something he does anytime he's imitating anybody who's flailing because they're caught in a lie. And it showed very clearly and compellingly that he wasn't mocking that reporter's disability. He was making fun of the fact that that reporter who happened to be disabled was caught in a lie. And so for the first time in my whole life, I watched this and I thought, wow, CNN led me to believe something happened that didn't happen. And why did they do this? And how often is this happening? And that's what started kind of this journey of research that ultimately showed me that the media I'd been trusting my whole life was lying to me.
It's pretty hard to come to that revelation, right? I mean, I haven't gone through that. So I can only imagine how difficult it is to go, wait, I trusted all of this and it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah. Well, the worst part about it is when you start to see more of it and see more of it, and that's what was happening, because I went back and I started researching, all these moments from Trump's did he really call all Mexicans rapists? Did he really advocate for banning Muslim people from our country? Just all these things that the media was saying. And I was finding time and time again that none of them were true. And in many cases, it was almost like the opposite was true, and that they spun it completely out of context. But the hardest part was when you get to the point where you see the pattern enough and you realize internally you're starting to have this struggle where you're going, I can't support this anymore. I can't continue to be a part of this. But that means you're going to lose all your friends. You're going to lose the life, because you're part of a network of people who all believe this.
Right.
And they all think it. And they hate him so much. I hated him so much. It's not something you can just go and be like, oh, hey, we misunderstood this whole thing. Like, I actually went through a period of time, like literally for months, where I thought I was just going to keep being a liberal. I was going to push aside everything that I had learned and just fake it. I mean, I literally considered this. I was like, I'm going to keep hanging out in the same circles, keep going to the same parties, the same dinners with the same people. And when they start bashing Trump, I'm just going to kind of put my head down and laugh and wait for the subject to change. That was what I considered as a plan for a while. And I was like, I can't do it. It's like living a lie, and I can't.
And you grew up in Nebraska. You're not going to live a lie.
No, right. Right. Yeah. And so slowly I started planting seeds on social media, and I started by asking questions. I didn't just come out and say like, hey, I'm starting to change my mind about Trump. I started to just ask questions like, there's, I don't know, 55 or something Muslim majority countries. Only 5 of them are on the list that Trump has temporarily banned from travel. Is it really a Muslim ban? Like that, if it was a Muslim ban, why wouldn't all Muslim countries be banned? And what I started to find is that even a simple question like that, I started getting all these people in the comments that were, friends and followers on social media that were like, why are you supporting Trump? Why are you defending him? What are you doing? And I started getting agitated the more push. I'm like, this is a reasonable question that I'm asking. Why can't we talk about this? And so then I started getting kind of defiant and rebellious, because I was like, I'm not doing anything wrong. And I'm getting attacked for asking legitimate questions. And so I think that pushback propelled me to dig in my heels more. And then over the course of the next few months, I started losing all of my friends. And by the end of 2017, I had lost like 90% of my friends.
When did you start WalkAway?
May of 2018.
So you had lost all your friends,
Yes.
and it still was basically almost half a year before you started WalkAway.
Right.
Had you made other friends in conservative circles or Trump supporting circles?
I just started to. And I think that probably started happening at the end of 2017 was a very lonely year for me. I lost most of my friends. I didn't make that many new friends. And I was living in New York City at the time too. It's not that easy to find Republicans.
Yeah.
But I did. I started to meet a couple conservative friends in New York, and they introduced me to a few more people. And one of the friends that I made was still a friend of mine today. His name is Mike Harlow. And we had a very similar story and very similar walkaway journey that happened at almost exactly the same time. And so he and I started sharing information, and we would send posts to each other on social media and be like, oh my God, can you believe we used to be liberals? These people are awful. And it was around April of 2018, about a month before I started WalkAway. I knew I wanted to say something very profound about my experience, what I had just gone through. And I was out jogging one day, and I felt like I had been struck by lightning, because I kind of heard this phrase in my head: once upon a time, I was a liberal. And then the script for that video kind of downloaded itself into my brain, and I got really excited, and I ran home and I wrote it all out. And I called my friend Mikey, and I read it to him, and he's like, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I said, well, I have this idea. I was like, what if I make this video and put it out, and then let's create this hashtag. And it was already in my video, because the script, I had ended it by saying, so I'm walking away. And I encourage all of you to do the same, walk away. And I was like, what if I started something like, and we called it like the WalkAway campaign, and tried to get other people to walk away, use this hashtag and share the videos. And he was like, this is great. This is great. So he actually helped me shoot that first video, and which happened just weeks later. And then I edited it together, created the Facebook group, launched the video, and we were off.
And how you grew very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because there were other people like you.
Yeah.
You weren't the only one who
Yeah.
was going through this metamorphosis or whatever
right.
we want to call evolution, whatever it was. And so what was your experience at that point?
Well, okay, so I put the video out, and part of the reason too, you hit the nail on the head of, it wasn't just that I wanted to say something profound about my experience. It was that I'd gone through 2017, very, very lonely year. And I kept thinking to myself, there's got to be other people that are having this experience. And I thought, what a shame it is that there's not a community or a network of support for people to come together as they're losing their friends. And some people lost, jobs, family members. I know from starting WalkAway and people joining, we know grandparents who lost access to their grandchildren because their liberal kids wouldn't allow them to see their grandkids anymore. People in their 20s or 30s who their parents won't talk to them anymore. So it's devastating. And I thought, it's really too bad that there's not a community and a network of support. I felt in my gut like it was a good idea, and I felt like it would work, but I didn't know for sure. But I launched the video, created the group, and my instinct was right. A lot of people were feeling that way, and they were waiting for someone else to just say, like, oh, and that's, I think, what happened at first. I think people saw my video and they're like, yes, oh my God, yes. And so then they start joining and sharing their own stories. And I think the reason why we exploded so much is because that video did very, very well, the first video. And I worked really hard for about 5 weeks to just keep doing. I said yes to everything, every podcast, every little radio interview. I didn't care if it had like 50 listeners. I wanted to share the mission and the idea. And then after 5 weeks, we caught the attention of Tucker Carlson, and he had me on his show. And then it just like blew the lid off of everything. Then the nation knew, and it just exploded from there.
Right. I know that I reached out to you in those early days. I don't remember if it was before or after Tucker, but when I see things that are happening online, I just reach out and I try to mentor and help out and just go, here's my phone number. Feel free to reach out. Maybe I can help connect you. Or if you're going to start a nonprofit, let me know. I'll try to help you with that. Because I've been there. I've been there where everything around you is exploding and you don't even know what you need to be doing from a business standpoint to keep all that other stuff going, because you did start a Facebook group before you began, but it's not like you thought, okay, well, now I'm going to completely change my entire life and drop everything else that I've been doing my whole life to go do this. Yes. And it's weird.
It's like, overwhelming.
It is. It's completely overwhelming.
Yes.
It's what happened to me with the Tea Party movement. Like, I'm going down this one path in life, and now I'm on a completely different path. And and it changed my life. And I don't regret it. I don't have regrets about it. It's just completely different than what I started out thinking at the beginning of 2009.
You're 100% right about that. And I do remember you reaching out, and you and I did talk many times over the course of the next several years. And I appreciate it so much, but I know that you know this too. It's so hard when something like this happens. You're being contacted by so many people, and this person will tell you, oh, don't trust that person. Oh, no, you don't want to connect with this. And then this one says that. And so you're hearing all this information and you're just trying to learn what's going on and figure it out.
You don't even know who the people are, and you're being warned off of it.
Yeah. I didn't know what a 501c3 was. I didn't know what a 501c4 was. So I had people saying, oh, you've got to make this a PAC. No, don't make it a PAC. You've got to make it a C4. No, don't make it a C4. You've got to make it a C3. I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is. But it does. It takes time to figure it out, learn the ropes, learn who you can trust and who you can't trust. And I'm still figuring that out. But, and it changes day to day.
It's my advice to anyone listening is you can only trust a very tiny circle.
Absolutely. Yeah, and post J6 taught me that. I
Yeah.
think I really learned who the good guys are and who your friends are because of the J6 experience, which we'll get into. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, and we'll get into that. But you know, in 2024, Trump had so many people supporting him that were Democrats. I mean, we have Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and other people who were lifelong Democrats. And you have to have been sitting there going, oh, I can relate to what
Yes.
you're going through
Yeah.
and what when I see RFK Jr. supporting Donald Trump, he ran as a Democrat and then as an independent for president of the United States, no less.
Yeah.
His father was assassinated. His uncle was assassinated. His whole identity is tied to the Democratic Party. And I can't even imagine emotionally what that had to be like for him.
Yeah.
But you probably can much more than I can. What I can do is say that those who have been conservative, like lifelong conservatives, we have to have the grace to let people change their mind.
Right.
You have to let them be able to change their mind. And we also have to be welcoming to the people who are changing their minds. And we may not agree on every single issue,
That's right.
but that isn't, politics makes really weird bedfellows.
Yes.
You find the issues you agree on, you work on those issues together. When you don't agree, don't attack each other. Just work on the issues separately.
Right. And I would argue too that I would like to see in general conservatives loosen up a little bit on almost this defensiveness about an unwillingness to at times compromise or reconsider certain things, because I think there's such a defensiveness of conservative values, and I understand why. I mean, we're literally conserving. That's what it means to conserve, right? But when you look at someone like RFK Jr., I remember when he came onto the scene and, a lot of people are like, don't, he's too liberal, don't trust him. And I get that because I have a lot of trust issues with liberals myself. However, I think when Trump started to embrace him, which kind of signaled to a lot of other people like that they could open their mind to considering, what he has to say. A lot of people, I think, have found a new interest in getting more involved in our health system and our food, what we're eating. And these weren't really things we were talking about before. So to me, that's one example. Don't be so resistant to people because they used to be on a different political party that you get into a mind frame where you're not willing to consider anything that they have to say or offer. Right. Because I do actually think that we can learn a lot from each other, even if people used to be on a side that we find, opposing to our values.
Well, and something about that with RFK Jr. that is important. I've met him at one weekend. So I met him maybe more than one time this particular weekend. It was in 2021. Maybe it was 2022, actually. About reopening, like the whole country has been shut down now for over a year and we're trying to get things open. And he did a huge event in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And I went to it with a bunch of the doctors who I've been supporting since 2020 and helping organize. And I met him there and I was thinking, okay, I don't know about all these other issues and where he stands on all these other issues that I care about, but we agree the country needs to reopen. We agree that these mandates are wrong. Right. And we agree that we need to be looking in the science related to the medicines much, much more.
Absolutely.
And that's what I mean. Like you find the area where you can agree with people. And maybe I never would have agreed with him on anything more than that if he had not run for president and wound up supporting Trump. But I could he was still a Democrat at that point. I could find a way to find agreement with him and be very thankful he was standing with all of us who wanted the country open.
Yeah. And I feel like politics, we've gotten so divided and it's become so contentious that I think everybody's kind of afraid at this point to cede any ground whatsoever, because there's like sort of this fundamental mistrust to a certain degree. And I think we've lost sight of the idea of kind of what you just said. We can at times cede ground and find common ground. That doesn't mean we're giving up our value system or
right.
And I mean, I think we can even set those ground rules at the beginning and say, look, you stand for a lot of things that I'm directly in opposition to, and that's not going to change. Like, I feel strongly about what I feel strongly about. Like, but you've got a good point about this or that or whatever. And, I'm willing to change my mind about this or that.
And in fact, over the years, I've also stood with the ACLU and the NAACP, mostly about donor privacy. And these are things, when I first started out, I never really thought I'd be standing with the ACLU on particular issues, but I've found a way, and had discussions with them. And I'm like, okay, so I don't agree with, we're not going to talk about any of the other issues. Let's just focus on this area. And sometimes you have to be able to do that.
Right.
But what you're doing is even more than that, because you're helping people who have thought about where they actually stand on the issue, what is real with what they're seeing in the media versus what is not, and giving them a place to land after they've learned more. Yeah,
that's what we were kind of have been all about, is trying to provide that that support network and sort of an edge. So we've had like a motto since day one, which is WalkAway is a journey, not a destination. And what we mean by that is we're not telling people where to go. And this is honestly why I think we had so much success, because it was never, despite vast misreporting on both sides, it was never walk away from the Democratic Party and become a Republican, or walk away and become a Trump supporter, which is what the media says. We just said, we want you to think for yourself, do your own homework, do your own research, walk away from identity politics, walk away from groupthink, tribal mentality. If you're Black or brown or LGBT or whatever, stop seeing yourself as your identity and see yourself as an American, that you're a part of the collective whole, like and that the American values are there. The American dream is there for anybody who wants to work hard and take advantage of it. And so we've had people in WalkAway who left the left and decided that they felt more at home being independents or libertarians or Republicans. Some love Trump, some don't love Trump, and that's fine, frankly. I mean, we just want people thinking for themselves and walking away from a political party that we feel like has been completely co-opted by very dark forces. And I think, in the simplest terms, a Marxist agenda, which is anti-American.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And we can have differences and still be able to say, but we love our country and want what's best for our country.
That's right.
And when we stop loving our country and wanting what's best for our country is going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of what the left is trying to do, is get us to be angry at our own country.
Yes.
And that's a dangerous place for us.
Yeah, well, and it's so true. And like the normalization of hatred and violence and all of this stuff from the left, it's crazy. I mean, you need look no further than just 2020 alone. I mean, when you have people normalizing and justifying looting, killing, beating, burning, destroying cities, destroying neighborhoods, all of this stuff. And people on the left are just like, well, it's a racial reckoning. This has been coming for, this is hundreds of years of injustice. And it's like, okay, so violence is okay. Okay, so theft and destruction is okay. Like, what are you talking about? And certainly they don't have that charitable spirit, if the other side, does something, that's out of hand.
And that violence harms the very people who they claim to be wanting to help. I have a friend from high school whose business in downtown Atlanta was destroyed or beaten up, had lots of destruction to it. And she put a Post-it note on the outside. I'm a Black business owner. Please don't mess this up. But it didn't matter. They were destroying every business.
Well, and we saw all of those videos too on social media of like people in their homes or their apartments, and rocks are coming through the window and they're shouting out, I support you. I support you. I support BLM. And they're still breaking their windows out. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was just anarchist, unbridled, thoughtless violence and destruction for the sake of violence and destruction.
And I always think it's very important. I think that there were people who went out in the daytime and marched with BLM for very pure motives. And I don't think they were the one, I don't group all of the BLM supporters together.
Right.
Mostly because Tea Partiers got grouped all together and with a whole bunch of lies. So I understand there was an element of bad people doing things, but you should be able to call out the bad people who are doing the things.
Yeah. It's funny. It's not funny at all. But when I see you saying that, it's almost like WalkAway has now been through so much, kind of like Tea Party has been through so much. And I see in you it's almost like this empathy, not to say that you wouldn't have had it anyway, but it's when you go through something so hard, it does kind of teach you this like additional layer of almost that you look at things differently, and you're kind of like, I bet there's more to this story, or I want to give them more credit, or because you know how that feels when you go through something like that, to be mislabeled or
And if they were out saying they don't want racism in America, I don't want racism in America. I think 95% of Americans don't want. I wish it was 100. I'm realistic. It probably is not. But so I don't fault them for standing up for what they believe in. But at some point, those afternoon protests turned into nighttime violence.
Right.
And that was a problem.
Well, and I think too, you can certainly have like a generous spirit about differentiating the nonviolent and the violent. But I think at a certain point, when the whole cause becomes synonymous with violence, if you're one of the nonviolent people, you almost have to step away and be like, okay, this is not the path.
Right.
And I wish more people would have done that, because I didn't see a lot of that in 2020.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, then we got to January of 2021 and January 6th. Yeah. You went through a lot.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about any of that now, especially now that there's been a pardon? It seems like you're probably able to clear the air a little.
Yeah. And that means a lot to me to be able to do that, because on January 6th, I was a scheduled speaker for a permitted event on Capitol grounds. And, when I went there to do my speaking engagement, I was on the east side of the building, and I started getting messages from people saying that people were going in the building and that something was happening. And my first instinct was, if something's happening, because everyone kept saying, we're hearing on the news that there's like a disruption or, something going down. Well, I don't believe anything the news says. I was there. I have a large social media following. I thought, if something's happening, I'm going to record it so people can see firsthand if the news is lying to them or not. And I walked up to the building. The barricades were fully open. There were no police officers on the east side of the building when I was there.
Which is the Supreme Court side.
That's right. Well, and it's also important for people to know it's the opposite side is where the riot had happened. On the west side of the building, people were breaking windows, fighting with police officers. That wasn't happening where I was. And so I approached the building, walked up an open sidewalk. And when I got to the stairs of the Capitol, they were filled with people. And the people were not facing toward the Capitol. They weren't trying to get in. They were just standing on the steps of the Capitol holding signs. And at the top of the stairs was a man, and he was shouting, "They've opened the doors. They're letting us in. We're going inside." This is all in my video. So I went to the top of the stairs. And when I got there, sure enough, the doors on the east side were open. And there were several hundred people at the top of the stairs. Some of them were trying to push their way in. The majority were filming like I was. I never entered the Capitol on January 6th, and I stood outside the building for 8 minutes. And after 8 minutes, a man came outside, got on a bullhorn, and he shouted, "They've cleared Congress. Everyone left the building. Move out, move out." And I immediately turned around, and I told the people behind me, "They're saying to move out. You need to go this way." I uploaded that video to Twitter, and I went back to my hotel room, and an hour, 2 hours later. And when I got back to my hotel room, I turned on my TV. And that's when I started to see for the first time what had happened on the west side of the building, or images of what had happened. And I became concerned when I saw the images, because I didn't understand it. And I thought, did something break out after I left? Like, is this happening live? I was just totally confused. And not in a million years did I think that I was in trouble, but I thought it was a good idea to take my video down for PR reasons, because I was like, I don't want my audience to think that if there's a riot happening right now, first of all, I don't want them to worry about me and think that I'm in the middle of it. Second of all, I don't want them to think I'm participating in whatever. So I took the video down, but it had already been copied by Twitter trolls during that couple of hours that it lived on Twitter. And they began reposting it compulsively. Every day, multiple times a day, and tagging the FBI and tagging the DOJ and saying, "Brandon Straka was there. He was a part of the insurrection. You need to come get him," all these things. people kept asking me for the next several weeks, are you worried? And I said, no, I'm not worried. I said, I didn't break the law. I don't have anything to worry about. But I said, I'm not super comfortable. I don't like this. But, you know, but 2.5 weeks after January 6th, on the morning of January 25th, a team of FBI agents in tactical gear raided my apartment, put me in handcuffs, began stripping my apartment of my phones, computers, hard drives, thumb drives, clothing, taking my things, putting them in bags, and they took me off to jail. And I sat in jail for several days. And when I got out of jail, I learned that I was being charged. It's so absurd. So I was actually charged with more felonies than most people with January 6th, including everyone who went in the building. So I started out of the gate with 2 felonies and a misdemeanor. And they had told me that essentially if I decided to go to trial, they were going to add a 3rd felony, the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding felony, which the Supreme Court later struck down, but numerous people were convicted of and spent years in jail. And they told us too, immediately, like the moment I got out of jail, my attorney told me, I've already been on the phone with the prosecutor. He said, I asked her, would they consider dropping these felonies if he pleads guilty to a misdemeanor? And her response exactly was, we would be open to that conversation, but you might want to mention to him, we have not yet charged him with the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding. She said, this is a charge we're giving to some of the J6ers. It carries up to 20 years in prison. And she said, we haven't given it to him yet, but we might. So it felt pretty clear to me this was a shakedown. And I knew on that first day I was going to take a plea deal. I knew in every fiber of my being that I did not commit a crime. I was not guilty of doing anything, but I knew that there was no path forward, that going to trial in DC was not an option.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And mostly because of who I am. I mean, being a Trump supporter in this situation is bad enough. Being the founder of the WalkAway campaign in front of a jury of Democrats, a Democrat judge in a district that voted 93% against Trump. No one voted for Biden. They voted against Trump. Like, forget it. So I told my attorney on day one, I said, I'm going to take a plea deal. Like I knew immediately.
Well, and financially, you would have been spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that you probably did not have to lose.
Yeah, to lose. And he told me that too. He said, we can fight this all the way to the end. He said, it's going to cost you a minimum of $250,000 to get through trial. And he said, in all likelihood, you're going to lose. And he said, if you lose, you're going to be a convicted felon. And he said, you're going to be spending time in prison. Like, it's guaranteed. He said, if you take a misdemeanor plea deal, he said, I'm pretty sure we can get it, you not having jail time. You know, he was like, it's a first offense misdemeanor. He said, you already spent a couple of days in jail. Nobody goes to jail on a first offense misdemeanor. He said, you know, I think we can get the judge to give you time served, which is preposterous in retrospect, but that's what we believed at the time. So I decided to take the misdemeanor plea deal. But what I didn't know is I had no idea at the time how corrupt the system was, because my attorney told me, he was like, you know, you'll get like a, what did he say? A trespassing. He was like, you'll get like a misdemeanor trespassing. It'll be like a jaywalking thing. He's like, it's just not a big deal. And I was like, okay, I can live with that, even though I don't think I did it, because the barricades were open and I walked into a crowd of, there was no way to know that you weren't allowed to be there. But I thought, okay, fine, misdemeanor trespass. I'm a political activist. You know, what good political activist doesn't have a misdemeanor on their record for, you know, something? And but what I didn't know is that when you take a plea deal, you put into the government's hands, they write your confession for you, and you have no choice but to sign it. Whatever they say goes. And so in my case, they came back and they said, Mr. Straka stood outside the building and shouted, go, 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 to encourage the crowd to enter the building. He witnessed the crowd taking a shield from an officer and shouted, take it, to encourage the crowd to take this shield. I did not do these things. I wouldn't do these things. First of all, it doesn't interest me. I mean, I don't care if someone takes a shield from an officer like that. Why would I do that?
Right.
But secondly, and I think most importantly, but I couldn't say it at the time until I got pardoned, and because my pardon essentially negates my plea deal. I'm not that stupid. I'm so blessed to have the life that I have. I have this amazing privilege that very few people have, where I get paid to tell the truth. Like, most people in this country have to go to work and go to mandatory DEI training and, you know, deal with all these woke policies at work. I get to earn my living traveling the country and telling the truth. Like, what an amazing privilege. I'm not going to screw that up over something stupid. And I get to do that for a living because I'm supported by conservative donors, people who give money to my organization who are against violence. They're against anti-police behavior. Even if I lost my mind and went to the Capitol and decided to encourage the crowd to attack an officer, why would I film myself doing it and then voluntarily upload that video to Twitter? Like, I would literally be destroying my career on purpose. And the thing is, like, I had no idea anything like that happened. Like, I had no, so there was no reason not to upload my video. Anyway, they wouldn't let that go. And we told them that's not true. It didn't happen. And the response that we got was, if he feels like it's not true, he's welcome to go to trial. And he's welcome to prove that at trial. And I could cry right now. In October of 2021, I signed the plea deal. I went into a depression so deep for several weeks that I didn't want to live. And it's not even like I was accused of murder, or something, but it's hard to put into words how devastating it is psychologically, emotionally, in every way to have to say you did something you didn't do, have your government force you to do it, and that you're now a part of this narrative that you were a part of an anarchist mob that tried to overthrow the government. When in fact, I had up until then spent years trying to make our country a better place.
Right.
That's what I was trying to do.
And you probably also lost even more friends during that time.
Yeah.
So you've already gone through the whole thing that you went through in 2017 where you were losing friends. And then in this time you lose friends as well.
Right.
And it's when like you look around and you're like, okay, now I know who really I can trust.
Right.
And there aren't a lot.
No, there's not a lot. And so a number of people that were my friends who were in media stopped, unfollowed me or stopped, communicating with me because they didn't want to have me ask them if I could use their platform to try to clear the air about at least some of these things. There were things I couldn't clear the air about because I couldn't overtly negate my plea deal, or I would have violated my probation and then I would have, gone to prison. But it's like they didn't even want, and there were so many people that I had on my stage at my events for years. People who, from day one when I started WalkAway, it's funny because so many people were not super supportive about the success that I was having, and there's he's such a grifter and he just wants, it's just all about him, and I really contend that it wasn't. I wanted to create an organization and a platform where I could lift other people up. If you look back at the history of my work and what I did with WalkAway, I rarely ever did events where I was the only, it was usually I brought like a panel of people. And
you did.
And oftentimes it was people that were relatively unknown, and a lot of them launched really great careers based off the exposure they got from WalkAway. And some of those people cut me off, and wanted nothing to do with me.
I've been there.
Yeah. No, it's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
It's horrible.
It is. But you just keep true to yourself and people will see it. Eventually they see it. And if they don't, what can you do? You can't control them. It's annoying, but I don't lose sleep over those people.
Yeah. But I while you and I are talking, the worst thing that I went through about January 6th, and I was criminally charged. I was civilly, when I took the plea deal, I was also sued by 8 black and brown police officers under the KKK Act, alleging that I was a white supremacist who went to the Capitol to encourage black and brown officers to be harmed. It took me 2.5 years to get through that case. And I think like $150,000. I ended up winning, but it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. I was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. But the worst thing of all was in July, I think, of 2022. And I believe firmly that the reason why this happened is because I had just gotten off of house arrest in May of 2022. And the moment that I got off of house arrest, I went back to work. Went to Los Angeles, did a WalkAway rally. The next month, I went to Arizona, did a big event with Carrie Lake, started doing media interviews again. Tucker had me on, Mark Levin had me on. I was getting myself back out there. And I believe that they were like, oh, no. How dare he think he can come back? And, the point of this was to destroy him. So all of a sudden, one day, the DC courts accidentally unsealed all of the sealed documents in my case for 27 minutes, and they accidentally ended up in the hands of NBC, Huffington Post, all these things. Now, every January 6th defendant who took a plea deal, a requirement of the plea deal was that you had to sit down with the FBI and the DOJ and answer questions. Fine. I was happy to do it because I thought to myself, I have no knowledge of anybody committing any crimes.
Yeah.
I don't believe that there was an organized attempt to overthrow the government. I certainly wasn't a part of it. I don't know anyone who was. And furthermore, I don't have knowledge of anyone committing any crimes not associated with January 6th. It's not even like I know, oh, well, this person, stole some money a year ago. I literally know nothing. And so I sat down with the FBI and they had a list of like 25 names, and most of them were high profile conservative activists, including you. And they were going through all of these names and asking me questions like, how do you know this person? Is this person your friend or is this person an acquaintance? Have you ever worked with this person? It was just bizarre, innocuous questions like this. And when I got done interviewing with them, we left and I turned to my attorney.
And it's very clear for everyone to understand you had to be honest, because if you weren't honest with the FBI, then you would have been in more trouble.
Correct.
Like you can't lie to the FBI.
Right.
So when they're asking those questions, you either can plead the fifth or you have to be honest.
But I didn't even want to plead the fifth.
Why would you plead the fifth? You're just answering questions about who you know, and you're not saying they committed crimes.
Correct. And everyone can have their own opinion about what the right thing to do in that situation is. I know other people that were brought into the FBI to answer questions, and they adamantly were like, I'm pleading the fifth. And they pled the fifth on every question. My opinion was, why would you do that? Because you're making it seem like there's something to hide. There's nothing to hide.
Yeah.
And just in my opinion, the best route is be transparent, because I have no knowledge that will help them convict anybody in a crime. So they go through this list of names, asking me these stupid questions. And I turned to my attorney after it was over and we were alone. And I said, well, that was weird. And he kind of laughed and he said, well, just be glad it was easy. And I was like, good point. It was, because I was kind of sweating it, like what's going to happen, but it was super easy. What I didn't know is that by answering all these questions, they document all this stuff. And then, oops, they accidentally shared this sealed information with the media. And what the media does is publish this list of names and say Strzok provided information on these people in order to obtain a plea deal. Now, that created this narrative that I'd gone in and just threw all these people under the bus so I could get a plea deal when there was nothing to throw people under the bus about. And that was a huge lesson for me too, because thankfully most of the people on that list reached out to me to offer some sort of word of support. I remember you texted me and you said, hang in there. And it was a really dark time in my life. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, it was so horrible. For at least 2 weeks, every time I opened Twitter, and I'm sure some of it was bots and whatever, there were literally like thousands of messages a day that just said rat, rat, snitch, 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 rat, rat, rat. You're a traitor. You're done. You're over. Your MAGA hates you. And I was like, your brain can't even process that volume of hatred.
After January 6th, I had my email address. It's pretty well documented, so it's not hard to find my email address if you want to find it. And I was added to so much spam accounts everywhere, like stuff on the left, stuff on the right, porn, stuff, all sorts of stuff. And I had to go, okay, I'm either going to completely burn the email address so I can no longer get email and communicate with people, or go in and create massive filters through Gmail to just filter out all but the things I want to see.
Yeah.
And it was insane. Like I would open my inbox in my email and have like 9,000 emails in a day.
Yeah.
Because I had somebody must have written a program to add me to accounts everywhere.
Yeah.
And Twitter was horrible. I had to go before the J6 committee. They asked questions about people as well. I answered,
Why not?
I didn't have anything
to hide.
I didn't have anything to hide. And I think one of the biggest problems on January 6th is that the entire city of DC, the District of Columbia, was completely shut down. And the mayor shut down from the Washington Monument to the Capitol, just shut down everything as if it were a parade route, even though there was no parading permit. So all the people walking, there was nothing to stop them. There were no cars traveling through the area. There was nothing to stop them. So there's just this crush of 1 million plus people. I think it was probably over 2 million headed towards one building.
Yeah.
And they're all going to the same place. And then the businesses were shut down too because of COVID lockdowns. So they didn't have anywhere else to go either. Like they couldn't naturally just peel away and go sit down in a restaurant. And I think that contributed to a lot of the problems because there's just a crush of people.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, I think there are a variety of reasons why it happened from,
moving everyone from the east to the west. I mean, I could go through a list of logistically, if things to never do, if you want to avoid this, and they did all the things you should never do.
Right. Well, and there wasn't,
and by they, plan. I just mean like people in the government managing what an expected crowd. And I've had a lot of permitted events on Capitol grounds. I know what they go through when they're looking at crowd sizes. And I don't understand why I've had to go through all those hoops, answering all those questions, if that's the kind of response that they're going to give when there's a crowd. It's just bizarre.
Well, and it's inexcusable because, remember too, that we had 2 major events previous to that in November and December where huge crowds came to DC to protest the 2020 election, where of course no violence took place. Antifa showed up and started attacking people. And then interestingly, they just suddenly didn't show up on January 6th, which is peculiar. But I think people had conditioned in their heads what they were supposed to do. I mean, because it was like, well, we're going to march, like that's what we're doing. We're doing this, and then we're going to march, and we're going to do that. And I think there wasn't clear information about what was supposed to happen. But I also think there were agitators there, and there wasn't any National Guard, and there's.
And the event at the Ellipse was well run, so there was just a breakdown, but the government wanted it to be chaotic. The employees wanted it to be chaotic because if they didn't want it to be chaotic, they could have been there making sure that it wasn't. And I had been there before. I told the J6 committee this the weekend that Obamacare passed. Within less than 4 days, we had a crowd of over 50,000 people on the West Lawn. And then they stayed. They wouldn't leave. They wanted to stay overnight and be there the next day. And they gave me an instant permit and on Saturday and said, you've got the permit for Sunday. And they said, just wear that same sweater because it stands out in the crowd. So wear that same sweater again tomorrow so we can find you. And you've got the permit. The crowd's listening to you. Just make sure that you show up. And so I know they know how to handle a sudden crowd if they want to.
Right.
If they want to, if the will is there, or if they are allowed to. And I don't know if the will wasn't there or they were not allowed to, or if they truly just misjudge the number of people who are going to show up, or a combination of all of it.
Well, and I can say too that for what I experienced, being on the east side for that limited amount of time, and that the doors were open and that people were kind of pushing their way in. If anybody, it's hard to believe that the Capitol doesn't have like a loudspeaker, a system that someone could have. If literally,
that is the biggest problem that day. There was no sound system to help direct the crowd.
Yeah, if anybody had said, "Everyone, get out of here! You're going to get arrested," they would have left.
Yeah,
they would have left. That's how Trump supporters are. I think the majority of people didn't understand that they were in a situation that was as serious as it later became, or would be treated as seriously as it became. And I think even if you look at where I was with the doors open and the people pushing in, previous to that day, people who had entered the Capitol who weren't supposed to got $50 citations for going in there. That's how that was treated. So even if you were someone who was like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, you didn't think that you were going to be considered to be part of an insurrection later and facing felony charges for an attempt to overthrow the government. I think people are like, this cause is important to me, and if I get a citation, and if they ask me to leave, I'll leave. I think that's how people felt, but obviously not what happened.
So so you have been pardoned from that.
That's right.
And you're able to speak out now fully and tell the truth, which is what you like to be able to do.
Yes.
And now we're headed into the rest of 2025, 2026. What are you working on? What is WalkAway doing?
Yeah. So this year, there's two really important governor's races in this country, Virginia and New Jersey. So what I've been asking people, I like to give people simple, attainable goals and things that they can embrace. So two just very simple things that I'm asking people to embrace in actually, from this point forward, let's say two things. One, that every year is an election year. I'll explain that in a moment. And two, that every election is a national election. Here's what I mean. You're an activist. You've been involved. You live this life 365 days a year, every year. So I don't need to explain it to you. But there are far too many people on the right who decide to get involved every 2 years or every 4 years for a few weeks before November. Not good enough.
Yeah.
Not good enough. We need to view every single year as just as important as those general election years or the midterm election years, because it all matters. And the left is building and gaining their momentum. It's a 24-hour, 365 days a year machine that never stops. Our machine can't stop either. But when I say that every election needs to be viewed as a national election, I think that in 2020, we saw very clearly what it means when a few governors, Democrat governors, and a few blue states, with the stroke of their pen, changed by executive order their voting laws, their election laws, which ended up contributing to costing us the 2020 election, because that's, first of all, not how you change election law, but also it was manipulated. And by that, I mean, because of COVID and everything, they manipulated a virus to change laws, which ended up contributing to us losing an election. So it matters very much who the governors are, who the state legislators are, who the Supreme Courts are in every state, not just the states that we live in. So people should care about the governor's race in Virginia, and they should care about the governor's race in New Jersey, because these are two states that are on the brink of being flipped and are basically swing states at this point. If we all work together and work hard, we can make them red states, and that's where they should be, and that's where they should stay. So WalkAway is going to go into these two states and do what we do, which is talk to the Black community, the Hispanic community, LGBT community. And we're also putting, interestingly, so we've been working with a lot of grassroots individuals and organizers in these two states to identify where should we be, who should we be talking to, and what's important. And we're hearing a lot that there is a large Muslim and Indian community in Virginia that has been voting Democrat basically since the Bush years, because a lot of them used to be Republicans, were very turned off by Republican policies after 9/11 in the Bush years. But now they're finding themselves very alienated by woke indoctrination in schools and the education system, what their kids are being taught.
Because it's contrary to what they want their kids to be taught.
100%. The problem is Republicans too often say this community is a lost cause or that community is a lost cause. I don't believe any community is a lost cause. I think we just need to talk to them and try to find common ground once again. So we're going to be going into Virginia and talking to all different kinds of groups, but I'm going in April and I'm doing 5 events in one weekend, all for Muslims and for Indians and for Hispanics. So we're doing 5 events just that one weekend, but we're going to be spending a lot of time this year talking to a variety of different communities. And in New Jersey, spending a lot of time talking to the Hispanic communities. And I'm actually tomorrow I'm going to be in New Jersey doing 3 events with WalkAway.
Oh.
One is with New Jersey mayors. So we're doing a roundtable discussion with mayors in New Jersey. We're also getting together people in their 20s to have a conversation about what is worrying and we need to be listening to these people, because it's not like when you and I were in our 20s. You may still be in your 20s. I'm not still in my...
Definitely not in my 20s.
Okay. Well, I think if you're a person in your 20s today, it's a very daunting thing to look at your future and say, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to own a home, or I don't know if, will I be able to retire? Or what will that look like? It's scary. It's scary for us. It's extra scary for them. And so we want to hear what's concerning people in their 20s and what policies would change their mind and get them to consider walking away from what they've been supporting, up until this time. And then we're also doing a discussion with moms in New Jersey. So we're going to be out there just busting our butts in those 2 states. And my heart is always with California too, for some reason. So we'll be spending a lot of time in California this year.
That's good. Well, the Californians will appreciate it. They always feel, they feel left out. So that's very good.
Well, they do. And I also believe, I love a challenge, and I think there's so many great conservatives in California who know that they should leave, but they won't, because they're like, I'm going to stay and fight for my state.
Right.
And it's like, if you're going to stay and fight for your state, I want to help you, because I like being alongside fighters. So,
well, and the Democrats never give up on Texas. So why should we give up on California?
Good point. Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. Yeah. And then in addition to that, we're just going to keep trying to reach people, encourage them to share their walkaway stories, share their walkaway videos as they always have. We went through hell after January 6th. Our platform, which had grown to over 500,000 people and thousands of videos and shared stories, we were deplatformed in an instant by Facebook. But I will share with you and your audience something that most people don't know. And I said a little bit in your panel yesterday. We're getting some help with the Attorney General in my state. And they're in communication with Facebook right now. I can't say as much as I would like to say, but I will say they're having very serious conversations with us about a settlement. And part of that settlement is that I'm demanding the reinstatement of my group and all of that content that was lost. They're researching to see if that's feasible but if it is, I think that there's a strong chance we may be reinstated.
Very good.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would.
That would be really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, how can people get involved? Where can they find you?
I highly encourage people to go to walkawaycampaign.com. They can check out who we are and see more about our movement. If they're so willing, there's 5 steps that I know this, I might as well be asking them to build a bridge, but they're easy steps. They're easy steps. If people go to walkawaycampaign.com/next, NEXT, we have 5 steps that we ask people to take. Sign up for our email list, sign up for our texting list, join our Facebook group, join our app, and if they feel so willing, to donate to the cause. I know that people don't like to take that many steps, but here's the thing. We are still, even in this new era of Trump, which thank God, we're still living in a time where big tech is not on our side.
Right.
And all too easily, you can build something amazing and boom, they turn the lights out on you. We need to have as many means to communicate as possible.
It's really important that people sign up and they do your email and phone and hopefully zip code so that you can get in touch with them and you know where they are.
Yeah.
It's extremely important. And we do everything we can to get that information. And you're right. It's a big leap, but you're only asking for it so you can communicate if big tech censors you.
Yeah. It takes 2 minutes to do those things. And I wish I had taken it more seriously before January 6th, because as my Facebook group was growing and growing and growing and growing, we always, every day we would say, one day they might deplatform us, but it never felt real. It felt like it could happen, but it probably won't happen to us. And then it did.
Right.
And when it did, it was like, man, we didn't have backups of all those videos. I mean, we had like maybe 1,000 backed up, but I mean, we lost thousands of videos. We didn't have email addresses for, 75, 80% of the people that had joined the movement and stuff. So our email list was a fraction of what the actual group was. And so in many ways, we're starting over again from scratch. So it's just good to have all of that data.
Very good. Well, I'm glad you're collecting it now. WalkAwayCampaign.com.
Yeah, /next.
/next. WalkAwayCampaign.com/next. Yeah. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you like this episode, let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment or a 5-star review. And if you want to be the first to know every time we drop a new episode, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for whichever platform you're listening on. If you do these simple things, it will help the podcast grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.